Today's episode is sponsored by Hulu. Welcome, everybody.
Today's episode is sponsored by Hulu. Today's episode is...
Today's episode is sponsored by Hulu? Oh, we can do it at the same time.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Today's episode is... What?
I don't know. We were off, but I don't know if it's a lag. Today's episode is sponsored by Hulu.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm thinking about this. The very last thing we talked about when we were rewatching our thing on Hulu was how Wentworth does this all the time.
Oh, wait, what? Yeah, this. Yeah.
This.
Yeah.
And you do too, hey?
Yeah.
What is it? What do you do?
I don't know. I find myself doing it. In fact, I did a photo shoot about 20 years ago in Chicago. And my girlfriend at the time kept this picture, and she was like, could you do that all the time? I was like, in real life? She's like, no, when you're acting.
Oh, really? So we just watched Fire/Water.
302, episode 302.
302.
Did you watch on the Hulu app or do you watch on the website? I watched it on the website this time.
I watched it on the website.
Okay.
And by the way, if there's anybody who's craving more of the Prison Break cast on Disney Plus, which I think is like the Hulu bundle, The Company You Keep is there, which is the show I did with Bill Fichtner.
Oh.
And so there is, in fact,
I'm going to check in. I'm going to check
more.
How many
Bill.
episodes are there?
Because there's no such thing as too much Bill.
No.
That's such a good question. 10?
Okay.
Question mark.
Okay,
so
you want to tell them who today's guest is going to be before we get into the Adelstein Index?
I sure do. It's actually our very first returning guest of the podcast because it's show creator Paul Scheuring, and he wrote episode 301, which we rewatched.
Yep.
Last week, and we had a chance to talk to Dawn and learned about how Paul was brought on. And so we thought it was high time to talk to Paul about some things. And we have a huge number of questions from fans for him.
Yes. He said last time we talked to him, and we've said it, multiple times on the show, it was a 2-season idea. It was a 2-season idea. Dawn said something kind of different.
3-season idea.
Right, but also her 3-season, yes. And then, so I can't wait to pick his brain on that. And
it's going to be super fun.
Yeah. Don't forget, for going forward, if you want to ask our guests or us questions, you can do that through the Discord community. So get on Patreon and do that.
Yeah. So the way you do that is wherever you are in the show notes where you're listening to this, you join Patreon, and then that'll point you to a private Discord, which is pretty rad. Okay.
Adelstein Index?
Adelstein Index.
Yeah.
Let's do the Adelstein Index. Okay. So episode 302, Fire/Water, aired September 24th, 2007.
My mother's birthday.
Really?
Well, not 2000.
Your mom was born in 2007?
2007. Yeah, I knew that was coming.
Yeah, sorry, I know. I'm such an asshole. Happy birthday, Mrs. Adelstein?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was the name she was using.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how old your mom was in 2007?
Yep.
Math.
She would have been 69 years old.
Dang. Okay. So impressed on the math. Matt Olmstead wrote this episode, husband of Dawn Olmstead, as opposed to Marty Adelstein, who produced this, who is no relationship to Paul Adelstein.
So
Bobby Roth directed it.
Myself. Yep.
So confusing. Bobby Roth directed it. He would go on to do a total of 15 episodes, making him the director who did the most on the show. This episode premiered to 7.41 million live viewers, competing against ABC's Dancing with the Stars, which won the night with 21 million viewers.
Wow.
And then 2 pilots. The pilot of the action drama Chuck on NBC, starring, I think, Zach... What's his name?
Levi?
Yeah, who was my not so secret celebrity crush for a hot second.
And what's her name? I can't remember her name, but she's amazing.
Can't remember.
She's very funny. Yeah.
And they had 9.2 million viewers, which is kind of wild because that show didn't actually last that long.
Couple seasons.
But I really I enjoyed it. Anyway, and little show, a little pilot called The Big Bang Theory.
Wow.
Over on CBS, which drew 9.5 million viewers.
That was the pilot of that as well. Big
and
pilot.
Blew up. Yeah. Blew up. And then ESPN had Monday Night Football that topped out the night at 10.79 million viewers.
That is a lot. Of viewers. 10.9, 9.2, 21.2, 7.41. That is
58,100,000 live viewers.
That's like a quarter of the country. No, that's wrong, but it's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
Okay. Let's talk about what else is going on in the world.
Yes.
India beat Pakistan to win the 2007 IC World 2020, which I believe is a shorter, faster version of cricket.
I'll take your word for it.
I looked that up, so yes,
Okay,
it is.
good job. Well done. The number one song on the Billboard Hot 100 was Kanye West's Stronger. Speaking of folks who age well, the number one movie at the box office was Resident Evil Extinction.
Wow.
Go Zombies Go. And was that Mila Jovovich?
I don't know. I never saw any of them, but
I know
would
she
imagine.
did one of the zombie things.
think
Anyway,
she did
I
a
worked with
bunch.
her.
Oh,
Actually, I worked with her right after I left Prison Break. We did a movie together, and I adore
yeah,
her.
I'm a big fan.
She was a marvelous human being to work with. And then on the same day at midnight, Microsoft released Halo 3, which drew people into huge lines all around the world.
Yeah, that was a big deal. It was like video games becoming like movies. And finally, in weird but true news, September 24th also saw the release of Jackass, the game.
Which I have never heard of, and
me
now
neither. And if
desperately want to play.
If anybody has, please send us a DM or something on the Discord channel. We want to know what that is.
Yeah, Jackass.
Okay, before we jump in to talk about it, let's recap this episode. After Michael gets bad news from Lincoln, which he's usually getting, he sets out to find a prisoner named James Whistler who holds the key to his freedom. Easier said than done. Whistler is hiding in Sona because there is a price on his head, and Letchero is not about to help Michael find him. In addition, both Mahone and Bellick want to get to Whistler as well. Meanwhile, Teabag won't allow a little humiliation to stop him from insinuating himself into Letchero's good graces to
so
chilling effect.
Okay, so I have a couple of notes here. First of all, small thing. Wouldn't everybody in this prison have lice?
I mean, no, because they all have for some reason they all have shaved heads and they're clean shaven. So there are things in Prison Break, and the creators talk about this, the writers talk about it. Sarah talks about it as thinking about it as a graphic novel. There are what certain writers call the House of Buys.
The House of Buys.
Yeah, you just have to buy that. So you got to buy that. Everybody just has kind of the same haircut. Razors, clean shaven, or kind of shaggy. Great dudes. So yeah, everybody would. Lice, I think, would be the least of it. But
I mean, there'd be like lice, dysentery.
Oh,
I know
God.
that's not super exciting.
You know what I read? You know what I read this week? Do you know what the number one cause of death was during the Civil War?
Lice?
Diarrhea.
Oh, wow. Okay. We're going to move right on from that because that's all I can take of that. So there was a line when Carlo Alban's character, McGrady, maybe the kid with the
he's wearing
jersey.
He's wearing a Tracy McGrady jersey.
Oh, is that a real person?
Yes, a Hall of Fame basketball player who played for the Toronto Raptors and then for the Houston Rockets for a long time. And
that's, by the way, I'm so impressed that you knew that. Okay. Well, so he asks Michael Scofield if he has ever met
He says he's
Michael
from
Jordan.
Chicago, and he says, did you ever meet Michael Jordan?
Yeah. And so since you're from Chicago, I, thinking this was funny, said, Paul, have you ever met Michael Jordan? And you were like, yeah, a couple of times.
Yeah, a couple of times.
Can you fill me in on that?
Once I stood in line at an event at the Berto Center where they I almost said rehearsed, where they practiced. And then I did a commercial with him. So got to spend the day around him at least.
For what?
For WorldCom, which is a defunct cellular MCI company from the 90s. I mean, this is at the height of the Bulls' dominance. It was a very interesting day.
Wow.
Let's move on.
I loved in this episode that we got a little bit of Michael Scofield, structural engineer.
Oh, I know. I missed it.
Just the opening of the things and the feeling of the pipe. Like there was this, and you feel his, oh my God, I don't have a plan for this. You feel the messiness of a sort of impromptu engineering solve. And I liked it. It felt very vintage Prison Break in a way that I was kind of into.
Even in season 2, there's some stuff because there's a lot of pre-planned stuff. Yeah. But there's not a lot of MacGyver stuff. There's not a lot of, I'm fiddling with the thing and building another thing.
Get me a bottle of hooch. I'm going to soak my sheet in it.
I also like that he goes from this large problem. He has to get Whistler out. to an immediate problem, which is, all of these people are trying to kill Whistler.
Right.
So then he's like, I need to solve this problem first.
Yeah.
I need to get the bounty off this guy's head.
Yeah.
Which he does by delivering water to the entire prison by putting fire in the pipes.
I assume by like creating pressure in the pipes that forces out water.
There's just water in the pipes?
I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of explanation.
I
of
know,
that
which
part.
I kind of was surprised by and also kind of liked.
There's something about it that's a bit of a flex that the show's like, look,
Now there's water.
he's going to do a cool thing and it's going to result in water.
He's Michael Schofield. Just shut
it's
up.
Michael
Go
Schofield.
along
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. Just don't. Shh.
Yeah.
Pretty girl. Shh. I worked with a guy in a bar who used to do that, not to me, but to another one of the servers.
Oy.
Like, pretty girl. Shh.
Ooh.
And it was sort of funny because she was so much smarter than he was. But yeah, we all hated it. I think
Yes.
we should bring Paul on.
You want to tell the people about Paul Scheuring, Sarah?
Aw, we've told them already. We'll tell them again. Paul Scheuring is a writer, director, producer, and novelist,
Yes.
which wildly impresses me.
Me too.
Because there's so many words and so many pages.
So
in
many
novels.
words. Just keep coming.
He created the series Klondike that Ridley Scott produced, A Man Apart, starring Vin Diesel, and of course Prison Break. And we welcome him back to the show.
Yay, ladies and gentlemen, Paul Scheuring.
Today's episode is brought to you by Hulu, streaming every episode of our very favorite show, Prison Break.
Watch Michael Schofield's daring plot to save his wrongfully convicted brother from death row. Start at the very beginning or skip straight to your favorite season.
From the unforgettable twists and legendary characters to the nail-biting drama, watch it all on Hulu or on Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply. It's Paul.
It's Paul Scheuring. Repeat guest Paul Scheuring.
Our first and only so far repeat guest.
Pater familias.
Hi, folks. How's everyone doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Thank you for coming back. We realized, so I say this a bunch. I apologize to the fans. This is going to be a repeat. Paul and I never saw season 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are on
When
this
you say
podcast.
Paul, are you talking about me or are you talking about
Me.
I
That-
assume both of you.
Wait,
That's
definitely,
all of us. That's
definitely
all of
me.
us.
But that's one question that we have for you.
Okay.
But so when Sarah and I are doing our rewatch, we're doing our watch. It's not really a rewatch.
It's brand new.
Right.
So there's a lot of
Haven't met a lot of the people.
haven't met the actors or the storylines and the fans. It's really interesting interacting with our fans on this one because they are completely ahead of us
So
on
far.
everything.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's really fun, and I'm finding it really weird because it's so Prison Breaky, but it's not. It's like having a dream where you're like, it was my house, but it wasn't my house.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels a little bit like going to your high school reunion in a small town where everybody stayed and you left.
Or like watching
Totally. That's
a
well
movie,
put, Sarah.
watching a movie you're in that's subtitled or other people playing the roles. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yeah,
Sarah.
they dubbed some guy's voice.
Okay, so here's a big question, Paul, that Sarah and I have been talking about from the very beginning, and that we have gotten only recently seem to have gotten some pushback on. And apologies if we discussed this the first time we had you on. Our understanding was that Prison Break was, once it was a TV show, went through all the iterations that it may have gone through, whether it was a series and not a limited or all those things, that it was a 2-season idea. Because Dawn recently said it was a 3-season idea. I don't remember,
We remember
Sarah.
you saying in season 1 it was a 2-season idea.
And Sarah, what did she say with the 3rd season idea was? That he gets then
Catch Me If You
that it's
can.
Catch Me If You Can. That's right. That he then gets hired by. Okay, Paul's shaking his head vigorously. So we have the answer to that. So then the question becomes, and you can go just as before we caveat by saying anything you say that you want cut later, like I'm not involved with the Russians, we can cut. Tell us about and season 2, whenever you're in that process of shooting or editing or whatever, and 20th or Fox comes and says, we want there to be a season 3. From that phone call forward to you writing
Episode 1.
And then not being involved. I think from there, we kind of want that story creatively. Yeah.
Well, I think
we should.
I think we should go all the way back to the beginning just to get a sense of what the intention was.
Yeah.
And so I had, in 2003, parted amicably with my, writing partner. We were only writing features at that time. And so, in Hollywood, when, I assume this is still the same thing, but when a writing team separates, there's this question within the Hollywood community, who's the writer, right? And so you have to, and it's an odd concept, but anyhow, that's what you deal with. And so you have to kind of go out, no matter what you did before, you have to prove that you can stand on your own 2 feet.
Yeah.
And we had been writing exclusively film, right? Or features rather. And, it came out of a meeting with Dawn, and she was saying, let's do a TV show about a prison escape. And I knew nothing about TV. And I actually thought a prison escape show would be a bad idea. Because I love prison escape, movies. I love The Great Escape and Shawshank and all that stuff. It's one of my favorites. However, I was like, I've got to prove myself here. I've got to write the hell out of a script, right? And prove to the community that I can, be a solo writing act. And so my process as a writer has always been, it's the way I learn, which is, that's all great. Thanks for the story, but what's the end? Right. Everything, the first and second act are just life support for the third act. And so, that's how I came into the Prison Break story, was a close-ended story. And I was very uncomfortable not knowing where it would go, which means that I had to know, all the steps that got us there. And the other thing, I was quite motivated. I wanted to come to Fox and say, look, here's not only the pilot, but look, here's the entirety of the thing. It was an overkill of work to prove that I could do something, right? And they said, okay, great. How long is it? And I said, it's again, this is early in the serialized process, right? Like the whole, I had a number of executives at the time saying, a serialized show will never work. And it wasn't until Lost came out with its big numbers on its opening night that suddenly we got greenlit, right? And I said, I can give you 22 episodes, because at the time I'm thinking that's a 22-hour movie. Jesus, that's a long movie.
It's a long movie.
And
it's a lot of Act 2.
Yeah, a lot of Act 2. And they ultimately, I can't remember where it was. It was after they, saw the pilot, and the pilot tested, through the roof. It was the highest testing pilot Fox had ever gotten. It was either there or when we started getting big numbers in the first few weeks of the season that they said, oh, can you do, and it wasn't even a question. It was a rhetorical question. It's like, can you do 2 seasons? I think it was after the pilot, now that I think about it. And I said, listen, I think the easy demarcation there is you finish the first season on the escape, and the second season is on the run. And then we wrap it up in 2 seasons. I even said to somebody, I don't know if it was Gail Berman or somebody who was president at the time, I said, after that, it's a good problem to have, that you need to continue it, but it's not going to be my problem. And so that was always the intention. And I think, by virtue, I think that's illustrated by the fact that, I subsequently left the show, effectively after season 2.
So,
but you wrote the first episode of season 3.
Yeah, I was
credited.
No, I wrote it. That was a contractual thing where I think they had re-upped me, some kind of vanity deal or whatever. It's, you got another year or 2 overall overhead or overall, whatever the hell it's called. And, I was going to go write another pilot for them, but they're like, you got to write the first episode of season 3. And, we had talked about, finishing it during the work on season 2, and it was clear we were going to get a season 3. We're like, well, where's this going to go? Right. Well, what would season 3 look like? So we were actively platforming that in season 2, or thinking ahead to it anyhow in season 2, while we were breaking and writing season 2. And, we knew that we had to get Michael in prison at the end of season 2 to platform season 3. And what's interesting, if you watch season 2, really season 1 and season 2 as companion pieces, it all works. It's all kind of got this continuity, right?
Yeah.
And then it's really almost like the last commercial break of, and I kind of did this on purpose, the last commercial break of the last episode of season 2. It's all wrapping up. Kellerman's dead. He's saved the day. All these things. It's all done. We're vindicated. And then all of a sudden, after the commercial break, the last 8 pages of script for 44 episodes, all of a sudden it's like, no, it's not over. There's a season 3. And so
Agent Kim is here. We lose all the money. There's another gun.
Here comes the general.
100%,
Here comes the general. There's
and
something called Sona. Well, the Sona thing was dropped a couple episodes earlier, right?
Yes.
Like there was just a piece of paper that said Sona or whatever that was. Yeah.
And we were trying to layer little tiny things in before, but it was very designed to because we knew there was going to be a season 3. But I was trying to keep the original integrity of the closed-ended story as long as I could. So if you watch, 41 and a half episodes, you'd be like, okay, that was a great story.
They're wrapping it up.
This is it.
Yeah. So how much of 3 actually got broken during 2? Was it the arc of the season, or was it mostly the setup of the season? I mean, was Whistler and Leggero, however you pronounce it, was all that stuff? Hold that. First of all, let me just ask: have you watched season 3?
Yeah, so that's where I was going to go with it. So we broke a lot the concept of season 3, and then I have to ask you guys questions because you've watched it, right? I haven't watched
6 of it. We've watched half of it.
Okay. So we knew he was going to get thrown in this prison, and the idea was it was based on this prison. I can't remember the name of it right now in Brazil, where the inmates were running the asylum. Right, it was literally a small dog eat dog kind of Lord of the Flies kind of. Right, what's it called?
That's my house. Yeah. I'm just kidding. I have 2. I have 2 kids. The inmates are running the asylum. You were saying, yes.
Yeah. And so it has to be a different prison, and it has to be, it has to feel different, and it has to feel like the stakes have gone up. And we said, well, let's put Michael in a hellhole. And obviously the trope of, then now the other brother's in prison. The other brother's got to break him out. But so we broke that in concept, and we described. I remember scouting and. Because we were shooting in Dallas for Panama, and we had to scout facilities. I remember because the idea was that it had this big surrounding no man's land, right? That if you got out there, you got shot, right? So we had to scout for that, and I think we drew some of that in CGI, I believe. But so all that stuff was definitely in the works.
Sorry, was it a real place or did you build?
The interior was a build. The exterior, that kind of monolithic, brick building, that it was not a prison. It might have been a brick plant or something that had been decommissioned, but it was such a cool site and a good exterior that we used that. But the entire interior was a build. And so there was a lot of thought that went into all that. So, I mean, I was definitely part of that for sure. And I remember Lechero, because I was trying to figure out a new antagonist, and Robert Wisdom at the time was, such a compelling actor, and, trying to get into his head and make a kind of complicated character. And then the Whistler thing in the basement, all that. And then the idea was, because we're like, but the escape has to be cool, it has to be different, and it can't just be a tunnel and all that stuff. And what we settled on was, and this is where my question goes to you, is it was kind of one of those Trojan horse escapes where you make the guards finally come into this space that they don't come into, and unbeknownst to them, you've tricked them and you're riding out with them. And I don't know that that's what happened.
We don't know yet.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't either. I mean,
we don't know that yet. We haven't gotten there
because as Paul said, we're episode 6, but it turns out because of the writer's strike, it was only a 13.
It's only 13. Season. Yeah. So we're halfway.
So, I mean, that wrench got thrown into everything too, right? Is that rather than
exactly. So I'm curious to see how it pivoted because I know that they had to deal with a lot of different things, and so I would say the early couple of months it was like here's what what we all collectively agree should be what we should do, but I don't know what happened subsequent, because basically after we shot that first episode and I turned in that script, I moved back to Northern California, and I said, God bless you guys. It's been because I love that writer's room. Those people are just awesome. And, I hope it goes on forever. And and they got a couple more years out of it.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, I mean, the differences are and similarities between the setup of 1 and the setup of 3 are very interesting. You see a lot of echoes and you see a lot of mirroring. But it's the motivations are much less clear. I think on purpose. I mean, there's a lot of people that are saying, I need you to do X in order to do Y, who turn out to be lying. Mm-hmm. You think Whistler's this guy, you think Leggero's this guy. All these things are constantly being, you're constantly being told, actually, that's not what's really happening. Season 1, for all the machinations of his incredibly complex plan, the emotional underpinning of it was very, very simple.
Yep.
Yeah, Sucre doesn't turn out to not be in love with Mary Cruz and actually be some white collar criminal.
And Lincoln doesn't turn out to actually be guilty. I mean, he's innocent. His brother is getting him out. I mean, it is a very it's a pure idea. I don't know if it could have sustained something so simple after 3. You need the kind of complexity of and the kind of obtuseness of what's going on, or opaqueness of what's going on now.
Well, you become forced into that space because again, these were 22 episode seasons the first 2 years, and so I mean, it was a minor miracle that we could keep the momentum and keep on point, during that time. But, I think any fan of serialized TV, starts to see that, that hinge moment where the original, momentum of the original conceit starts to, wear itself out. Yeah. And then it's like, can you overlay it with something new? And sometimes the conceit is so specific that it's like, wait, they're in another prison. Mm-hmm. Right. And that, I think that happens with tons of shows, and it's just, and the British are very good about that. They'll just, it's done. It's 2 years. It's a total hit. Yeah. It's 2 years. We're done. US is like, no way, IP, we're going forever.
Yeah. More money. Yeah. And that's also why Law and Order, which is not serialized, obviously is episodic. It's a 42-minute mystery. You can watch them. You can watch an episode of season 12 and an episode of season 2. Mm-hmm. And know exactly,
back to back. Yeah.
and it doesn't matter. And as a professor of mine in college taught us that, like, melodrama, which a soap would be melodrama, is that the paradigm is cyclical, circular. Like, you're going to see these lovers break up, get back together, fall in love, like da 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 da. Right. Prison Break or a thriller is a line.
Yeah.
Right. It's constantly developing. You're not going to go back. And if you go back and start repeating dynamics,
that's right.
Then you start to feel like this is, whereas in Grey's or in a soap, you want to see the repeat of this dynamic. Mm-hmm. Oh, it gets deeper and deeper every time they break up.
Yeah. Right? It's the agreement, the unspoken agreement between the audience and the writers, which is, this is a hybrid. You're here for procedural, but you are getting attached to the characters. Yes. And so, is McDreamy going to sleep with McSlutty or whatever? Right. And basically, but you're dropping back into a cool, how that bottle get up in that place in that person story. It's like, I'll watch that for an episode, right?
By the way, but you just pitched an episode of Grey's that I would actually go back and watch.
That's right. Fantastic.
You also brought on a whole new cast of characters.
I mean, there's obviously you 6 new
created
series regulars.
You had
Were
to,
you
though.
a part of any? 100%. And I mean, you're in a new prison. You're in a new country.
Yeah.
Did you have any part of that casting? Because you had some. I mean, if you haven't seen it, the work that Robert Wisdom does, the work that Carlo Alban does, the work that Denai Garcia does, like there's some phenomenal actors in this season.
Yeah, we were casting anybody that showed up in episode 1. I was definitely part of the casting, and who showed up thereafter, I don't think it's fair to say that I was. I mean, Wisdom was great. They were all great, and the challenge was that again, it's that weird thing. Once a show starts to have a certain currency and an expectation from the audience, they're like, I still want to see Teabag, and I still want to see, Bellick and all these people. And you're like, how do I get them regularly in the story in Panama? Because, Bellick's just not hanging out in the wings in some Panamanian, cafe. It's like he didn't belong in the story. But if he ends up in the prison, he has to be in the story.
Right.
But how many of our guys realistically can end up in that prison without this becoming cheesy? And there's that really narrow bandwidth where we're trying to figure out how many we can bring over and, bring as many of our players as we can without making it completely ridiculous. And so then you have to do some heavy lifting and bring in some new cast.
Let me go back one step and then we want to ask you some fan questions. Fans have questions, season 3 specific questions, but my question is this. Today, you were pretty clear about like, I'm doing 1 and 2 and I'm out. Mm-hmm. Was there a movement to get you to stay? One of the things that I'm struck by, this is maybe a separate question, is that how warm and healthy the relationships in and out of that writer's room remain. It's so rare over the course of a show. It's incredibly rare when a creator who's there for 2 years as an EP running a room leaves and there's no bad blood amongst anybody. It's really amazing and wonderful and a testament to everybody in the process. But was anybody calling you and being like, come on, man, stick around for 1 more, stick around for 2 more?
I don't think so. I don't remember that too much. I mean, I don't think they were like saying, "Hey, door, hit you in the ass, see you, bud." I mean, I think they could tell which way the wind was blowing. It was not too like strong, in either direction. It's like, "Oh, please stay. Oh, get the hell out of here." It was like, I think it was just a fait accompli. And moreover, like I said, I was at that stage writing a lot of pilots for Fox.
Right, that's what I was going to ask.
So I think they were trying to get me to launch the next show, and that whole network pilot process is by itself the craziest crapshoot of all time. But I think they were perfectly happy to do that. They're, again, and this is probably the over positive gloss on it, but I would guess if they were okay with me leaving, it was because they still had me under contract, and this show was well taken care of with a very, strong writer's room, and the wheels were all greased and it was all set up. And it's like, well, hopefully Paul can, deliver the next show and we can get 2 instead of 1 because we don't really need him on Prison Break anymore. But that's all speculation, but that might be.
Well, and you did come back for season 5, right? I mean, you did return to the show.
2016, right?
Because I remember doing all that press together, and you were, I think, the only original writer who was.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Involved with season 5 because they were all doing other things and they had deals in other places, and I remember when they called me about it, I was like, who's involved? And they were like, Scheuring's on board. And I was like, oh, great. Yeah, sure. Then yes.
That was an interesting one. Enough time had passed. And here's what made me say yes was one that Dawn had said that Wentworth had reengaged and Wentworth wanted to do it. And I found that interesting because Wentworth was pretty fried by the end of season 4 and was done with it. Right. So I met with him and he was really, really enthused about it. And the idea was just to do 10 episodes. And I'm like, look, if it's not, 2 or 3 seasons of 22, it's like, but it's 10 and we can get the old band together. Cause again, I loved working with all the actors and everybody involved, to the line producers and everybody. And I'm like, if we can all just get together and do our thing for 10 episodes, it ended up being 9. I'd like to do that just for old time's sake. And I love doing it. Just, sometimes there's a lot of productions actually, but not always. Sometimes it's just the production, it's just the teamwork, it's the fun that you have on set, the collective memories that you make, the shit talking that you do, and occasionally you make something pretty good. Sometimes you make crap, but you kind of you treasure that. And a lot of the relationships I had with you guys and all the other actors, the other writers, as I said, the crew across the board. It's like those will be great memories for the rest of my life.
How much time was there between season 4 and season 5?
We got to do the math. What's that? 9 years, 8 years, 9 years?
At least.
Oh, that much.
It was long.
Yeah.
It was long.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Because I was done Walking Dead and halfway through Colony. So there was a whole other show. You were off private practice. Like there was.
Right.
There was
that's
an
right.
entire run.
It was a long time. Okay.
So, Sarah, I had a question for you real quick, just to interject.
Yeah.
Season 3, you were not in that. You were just a head in the box. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But you were on another show because it was a contractual thing, right? Where we didn't lock you down, and so you got another opportunity. Is that what happened?
No. What happened is I got pregnant. And all I know, you may have more intel. I left season 2 and everyone was like, can't wait to see you for season 3. And I got 2 phone calls within, I think, 24, 48 hours of each other. One was, Business Affairs wants to know if you plan to take maternity leave. And I said, yes. And the next phone call was, they've decided not to pick up your option for season 3 because they had me under contract. I couldn't take another show because I didn't die at the end of season 2. And so it was, I remember Wentworth calling and he was like, are you okay? Because none of us saw it coming. Now, maybe there was a thought in the writer's room from the beginning, like, oh, this shouldn't, whatever.
No,
but
the head in the box was always a delay tactic. It was my understanding was keep her in the story. Well,
right.
But then I think, all right, you guys watch it. I haven't. I seem to recall that the idea was where Sarah was the first half of season 3. They kind of kept the character off screen. Is that right?
In a way. What episode is the head in the box, Sarah? I mean, she's kidnapped. She and LJ are kidnapped, but you never see Sarah. You see LJ.
Right, but don't we follow like a woman in the streets and we only see her back or something? And
that's the end of season 2. So the last thing you see is Sarah walking away.
Got it.
And then they're kidnapped for season 3. I think the head in the box is 4 or 5, I want to say.
Episode?
Episode 4 or 5. I will say there was, when they didn't pick up my option, they then came back slightly later and they're like, hey, we'd like to shoot you for like 3 episodes tied to a chair, suffering, whatever. And I was like, guys, I'm 9 months pregnant. Like that I'm not going to do. So
can you shoot me from the head up?
Well, and so that was the one thing that I was like, you've already fired me to now ask me to come back and fire myself. Like I'm good. I'm just going to be up here and have a baby.
So I'll get you guys back on track here in a second, but then you were in season 4 though. You were in season 4 though, right?
I was in season 4. So,
and how that kind of reunion, it seemed like there's some bad blood there, or unpleasant feelings. How did that kind of heal itself or reconcile?
I'll be honest, the overwhelming emotion for me was confusion because also nobody called me.
Mm-hmm.
So the only person that I heard from was my agent who heard from Business Affairs. There was no producer
I should have called you at season 3.
No, I don't know. I don't think that's honestly never crossed my mind. I didn't know what was going on. So Wentworth every couple of weeks would call and be like, how are you? How's the baby? This is what's going on set. I just read the script, whatever. So he was kind of my connection to it all. What happened was the strike had just ended, I want to say. I remember it was April 1st because the week before, I mean, this is skipping way ahead, but the week before at the end of March, out of nowhere, Kevin Hooks called me and he's like, hey, just checking in. How you doing? Like, what's life like for you right now? And I'm like, good. I got a baby, the strike, like whatever. And he was like, glad to hear it. And I was like, oh, that was nice. And then April 1st, I got a call and I can't remember if it was Olmstead or Hooks. And they were like, we'd like you to come back to Prison Break. And I was like, very funny. It's April Fool's. Love you too. And I
literally think it was an April Fool's joke?
100%. I was
Jesus
like, because I...
Brutal.
Bro, my head was in a box.
Imagine if it was an April Fool's joke.
Yeah, that's a terrible April Fool's joke.
But like, head in a box. Like, you can't... You showed the head on camera. And they call back the next day. And they're like, can we now have a serious conversation? And I think I think there was a credibility issue because it wasn't my head. I think there was, we'll get into this way later, but the fans had some strong opinions. And so I think
that was a mess. And my general feeling is, because again, I didn't, and this is not to like excuse myself, because again, in the case of
I'm
that,
not mad at you.
No, I know, but but I'd always, because I'm kind of like old school writer, artist, like I don't want to deal with business. I don't want to deal with politics.
100%.
And I've kept that pure my whole life. But in some ways, it's an abdication a little bit, where, I was letting all the people around me make the business decisions and the hard phone calls, right? And I think I probably should have taken a little more responsibility sometimes, at least on the interpersonal level, because I let it all filter through everyone else. Interesting. You reflect on it after all these years. You're like, I thought I was just creating a good vibe and like keeping it simple and letting everyone else do these jobs. But sometimes there is a point where you got to step in and go, hey, dude, are you all right?
Well, there's also, it was your first time show running.
Right.
And I think when I've worked with several first time showrunners, and I got really close with one recently, and she was just like, dude, the list of things you have to do that is unwritten is bonkers.
Yeah.
And she's like, nobody tells you that, like, oh, this part of emotional heavy lifting in cast interface is also a part of the job. And
that it should be part of the job. It's not, nobody describes it as part of the job. And so if you don't know,
there's not like a union book.
Well, that's what I mean.
It's an art form. It's an art form. Like,
correct. Yeah. But it's an art form that you only learn by doing, because nobody, even if you go to one of those showrunner WGA or DGA workshops, this isn't what they talk about.
Right.
No, and it's so much about personal interface and authenticity and trust. And, as we know in this business, very hard to get authentic interface with people.
Well, and also we were at a disadvantage on the show in that the writer's room and the set were very far away.
Yeah, I think so.
And there's just a lot. I mean, I've been on shows where the writer's room is, it's in a building on the lot, and you're all there.
Which is so great.
Even you don't see each other for a month, you know that you can walk into someone's office or they can come see you on set.
All right. So I have a question that's a teaser for the audience, and it may not even have. It may not even have resolution. But
okay.
So here we are pointing out some little peccadillos and things that are problematic in the relationships, et cetera, in the making of the show, and yet. I think we can all agree that no bad blood has endured in any major way between most of the players in this entire project, right?
Yeah.
At least that's my feeling. And again, I can see the small stuff like we're talking about right now. I'm like, I could have handled that better. But is there something I don't know? Are there certain bad bloods somewhere in the arrangement? And you don't have to say names. But do you think about it today in 2025 that anyone's on someone else's shit list still because of whatever happened on Prison Break? And
sure.
No names.
Yeah.
You think so?
I think that any group of 100 people, I mean, even make it smaller, like just let's say 30 people that works together between 5 and 6 years, there's going to be scrapes that leave wounds.
So you know of some.
I wouldn't. Bad blood would be overstating it. I think there are people who have bad, didn't have great experiences. Maybe it would be a way to put it. But I'm not one of those people, and I don't know how to put it exactly. I don't think that reflects poorly on the show. I think that's the nature of. Totally. Human endeavor. I mean, I sound pretentious, but I mean it. I think that I don't think I've been in a project where there didn't end up being maybe one where there didn't end up being some kind of.
Yeah,
Sarah, what do you think?
I think it's been a long time, and I mean, as dumb as it is to say time heals all wounds, I think there is. We were different people.
Oh my God.
I mean, most of us hadn't had kids yet. People have gotten divorced. They've gotten remarried. They've gotten sober. They've gotten
drunk
treatment. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's just, I think it feels, I mean, even when I watch it, I feel like I'm literally watching someone else. Now, when it comes to my head in the box, I am. But like, I don't feel attached to most of the ways that person I was experienced things, because I would do a lot differently. I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot.
Yeah, I was talking to my wife about that, just separately about life, and reflecting on certain chapters of your life, 20 years ago or whatever. And like I said, I go, there are certain things where I have absolutely no overlap. Like there's no emotional connection to it. It really is a foreign land that I apparently occupied for a little bit. But I don't have any emotional, deep visceral connection to it anymore. I'm not talking about Prison Break specifically, but that's definitely a dynamic of aging.
Here's a audience question from Joe on our Discord. It's very philosophical. How does it feel to have created something so special that captivates people now for decades? I personally can't remember a time without Prison Break being part of my day.
God bless you, Joe.
Wow. Thanks, Joe.
How does that feel? So, how does that feel?
I think, obviously you feel fortunate. But it really kind of makes you realize how random life is, and how just a constellation of events, like a massive constellation of events, has to come together to create something in the first place, right? Which is all the right actors and the right deal making and whatever was in my head when I was writing the pilot. It's just all these karmic inputs, and I say that in the Buddhist sense, not in the weirdo sense, all come together to make this first thing, right? Which is, hey, we shot this pilot. Cool. Now the rubber's got to meet the road. You throw that out to the general public. And I've never written for the general public. I don't know how to satisfy the general public. And just like, I'm just going to try and make something as good as I can. And that's what we all did. We all just came together and it's like, let's try to make it as good as we can. And then the crazy, totally ineffable thing is how the audience, in that particular era, right? Like, so 2000, whenever it was, 5, 4?
5.
It was right. It was just something in the landscape said, we love this, right? And then, as is so often the case, it's like things just disappear, and culturally, in terms of entertainment. You think of all the movies that you've seen in the 80s and the 90s and the aughts and everything, and you forget they existed. And you forgot you watched that show. But if you, again, Sarah, that idea of like no longer having, visceral connection with something, it's like, then you'll see a movie sometime from the 90s, you go, oh, I forgot about that movie entirely. But
Outrageous Fortune. Fuck, I love that film.
But it moved me. It was an important film for me at the time, right? But then you move on, society moves on, right? But with Prison Break, what's so extraordinary is, so let's see if I can reduce this and make this a very short story. My son's in high school now. My daughter's in middle school. And their friends recognize their last name because their dad wrote Prison Break, right? Created Prison Break. And then another thing I do on the side is I volunteer with the National Park Service at Alcatraz, right? Oh, wow. And so I'm part of the education program, and we walk around the 5th, to 10th graders. And the reason I did this was because when I was in 5th grade, I went to Alcatraz, and it blew my mind. And I was like, wow, man, prison escape and, adventure and history. And I'm like, let me go back all these years later and teach the kids that. And so I'll walk them through the cell block, and here's the cell where they, the Anglin brothers escaped. Walk them around the side. Right. Here's where they clambered up the thing and got on the roof. And then every once in a while, these little 5th grade kids, from all sorts of schools, all different walks of life, all around the Bay Area, will be like that show Prison Break. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of like that show Prison Break. but what's so extraordinary is
so cool.
is that the persistence of this thing, right? And again, so now we've got 3 levels of randomness, right? Which is all the things came together to make it, as filmmakers, right? And then the second thing was the time responded to it. 2005 responded to it and said, oh, we like this. This is cool. Let's make it a hit. And now 20 years later, it's got an escape velocity where all those other TV shows and films have gone into the dustbin of history. This thing persists, and you can't say why. It's just this random thing. And so it's fascinating to watch, And again, it's just, you kind of pinch yourself. You're like, wow, I don't know how this came to be, but I'm glad to be on the ride,
Yeah. And you can look back on it and we could have a discussion about binge watching TV, about the release of DVDs, about streaming, about how the show is set in a kind of way that it never becomes anachronistic because it's self-contained, and all these reasons. But what I love that you're not doing, which you see some people do, is saying, and I knew all that and I planned all that. I mean, you can look back on it and you could say, oh, this happened, Lost came out and then there was 24, and then, we obviously tapped into something that was going on, and then it continued for this, and this reason, and we got lucky with the alchemy of this and that. But the idea that some executive had the foresight of 25 years of programming, it makes what we do infuriating and special and ephemeral.
Well, here's the problem with people that make claims like that, right? They're almost always bullshitting.
Bullshit.
But two, if they felt at the time like, oh, I know this is going to work, then they might have been right on this one, right? But they're not telling you the other 100 ones that they said, oh, this is going to work. It's like that guy that comes up to you and goes, oh, I just executed the best stock trade, right? Yeah. Or, dude, I just made $1,000 in Vegas. It's like, tell me all the stories where you lost $1,000 in Vegas.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Can I ask one granular question? Because we're recording you a little bit out of order because of availability. So I've already interviewed Carlo Alban, and I asked him about McGrady.
Oh, yeah.
He knows nothing about basketball. And he was like, I don't know how I ended up with a Houston Rockets jersey. I don't know why it was McGrady. And I was like, I will ask Paul Scheuring. Do you have any memory of...
Yeah, that came out of the writer's room, and we were trying to bring in some, contemporary Latin vibe, so this didn't feel like a 1930s, representation of a, Latin American prison. And, all of us, had noticed, and certainly I did when I was backpacking around Latin America, there's this preponderance of American, Michael Jordan jerseys. There's a lot of Bulls stuff back in the day. And I'm like, that's what the kid would be wearing, I mean, the kid would be wearing an American jersey. And it's kind of fun if the character doesn't even really know that much about the player, he just loves that he looks American.
Yeah. And was there any, can you remember any conversation about it's because it's a real NBA jersey, right? We would have had to get permission or licensing.
He was still playing.
He's still playing?
He was still playing then.
Okay.
My feeling was that McGrady was not our first pick. And the other writers can probably speak more intelligently about this. But, we might have said...
cleared.
Yeah, that's right. And we might have said Jordan or somebody like that. And they're like, oh, you're not getting Jordan, but we'll give you McGrady.
Right. Sure.
We're like, hey, it's real. Let's do it.
Who's no slouch? Yeah. Also, you believe that that's a Houston team. You would believe that those characters would have been those teams would have been popular in South America too. Yeah. Given the communities and
yeah. All right. Should we ask our wrap up question?
Yes. Ask the wrap up question.
We ask this question of every guest this season. If you were locked up, who would you want to break you out? They can be anybody, living or dead, or imaginary.
Does not have to be a Prison Break character. Can be. Doesn't have to be.
Still got to be Schofield. I mean, come on. Even the kid at Alcatraz, he's like that guy could get out of anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. That's a good answer.
All right, it's a great answer. Thank you for being with us again.
Thank you, Paul.
It's always fun.
It's always nice to see you.
Yeah.
It's always really good to see you.
Yeah.
Have you back again. That'd be great.
All right.
Thank you.
Do it again. I'd love to do it again.
Ciao. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Please subscribe to our Patreon to watch along with us. Send in those questions. The Patreon link is right there.
Wherever you're watching.
Wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching right now. Prison Breaking with Sarah and Paul has been brought to you in partnership with Hulu. Thank you, Hulu.
Thank you, Hulu. Your hosts have been inmates Sarah Wayne Callies and Paul Adelstein.
Prison Warden is producer Ben Haber.
Getting us all caught up in the prison yard is editor Kevin Mackler.
The front man of our jailhouse rock band is me, Paul Adelstein, who made all of our music. Our prison industry staff is Ariel Zhu and Ro Brooks. They work on our socials.
Our prison yard tattoo artist, logo, and brand designer is John Nunziato and Little Big Brands. Check him out at www.littlebigBrands.com.
And follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Prison Break Podcast. Email us at pbpodcast@caliber-studio.com and call us at 401-3P-BREAK.
Prison Breaking with Sarah and Paul has been a Caliber Studio production. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.